What do IKEA, entrepreneurial grit, and breaking barriers in manufacturing have in common? They're all chapters in the incredible journey of today's guest. From navigating corporate America to building a thriving family business, she's a force for change, innovation, and legacy in our industry. Get ready to be inspired by the powerhouse that is Karla Trotman. Hello, and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and as always, I am super excited to have you here today. And we're here to dive into that human side of manufacturing, where it's all about the stories, journeys, and culture that drives this incredible industry forward. Before we jump into the episode, let me remind you to check us out at themfgconnector.com, where you'll find all of our past episodes, blog content, and so much more, resources, downloads, anything that you can think of. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, because that's where all these conversations continue. Don't forget to check out our other shows, Work But Make It Human, which is available on your favorite podcast platforms, where we unpack the tools and skills for leadership in today's workplaces, and the Manufacturing Connector over on YouTube, which is your go-to for practical solutions. If you love solving problems in cool technology, that show's got you covered. Okay, now back to today's episode. Our guest is someone who knows what it means to defy expectations, build legacies, and redefine leadership in manufacturing. Karla Trotman's story is a testament to vision, determination, and innovation. After an accomplished career with global giants like Honeywell, Gap, and IKEA, Karla didn't just rest on her laurels. She founded Belly Button Boutique while on maternity leave, turning her logistics expertise into a successful e-commerce venture serving clients from celebrities to international customers. But Karla's journey didn't stop there. She pivoted to lead her family business, Electro Soft Incorporated, breathing new life into the company and transforming its trajectory. Under her leadership, ESI has flourished, proving that bold moves and fresh ideas can break a flat revenue streak and spark new growth. Karla is not only a leader in her field, but a champion for minority business enterprises, using her voice and influence to close the minority wealth gap and pave the way for others to succeed. She's a CEO, an advocate, a connector, and an author with her book, Dark, Dirty, Dangerous, Building the Vibrant Future of Manufacturing. So buckle up, folks. This conversation is packed with inspiration, grit, and the kind of insights that will have you rethinking what's possible in this industry. So without further ado, let's welcome Karla Trotman to the show. Karla, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. This has been a long time in the making. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. Karla, I don't even know if we talked about this in our intro call. I have an icebreaker question now that I ask all of my guests, and this will be even better because you don't know that it's coming. What does company culture mean to you?
So we think about who are we as an entity? What do we believe in? How do we invest in ourselves? What do we take on as a job? What do we not take on as a job? How do we get along with one another? How do we communicate with one another?
Yeah.
And how do we interact and want to be seen to the outside world? Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. I love asking that question, and I might have to start a calendar or something with these as different months or something, because everybody's got culture is such a unique individualistic concept. I mean, there's definitions out there, but what it truly means to people means different things. And I love that focus on communication and how we do work. I love that. So let's dive into your background. Let's dive into the story of Karla. How did your journey start in this industry, and when did you get into leadership? Share your background a little bit.
Sure. I am the child of two parents who were college educated. One was an engineer, one was a systems analyst. The engineer had a corporate job. They both had corporate jobs, never thought of being business owners. And unfortunately, um, my father, who was an electrical engineer, was told that his division was closing down. He worked on instrumentation for blood analyzing equipment. He would design it, oversee manufacturing, and write software.
Wow.
And when he was out of the job, someone asked him, "Hey, you know manufacturing, can you build cables?" He looked at it, he's like, "Sure, this is, no big deal." The guy liked the cables. And so he asked him to build more. And the company literally started on the kitchen table.
Wow.
And when you see, you know, the statistics, I think you may, in family business in general,
Oh yeah.
children normally do not want to take over their family business because you've seen the struggle. You've
Yeah.
seen all the places that they've had to work on the kitchen table, in the garage, in an incubator space before incubator spaces were actually nice,
Yeah.
um, in all these other places. And I was like, no, I would rather go to college and major in something that I like,
Yeah.
which is what I did. And went into logistics, supply chain logistics, and had a career. And but throughout my life, I had always worked at the family business. Before anyone would hire me, my
Yeah.
family hired me. And I grew up building printed circuit board assemblies, cutting cable, stripping wires. My first job was cutting wire for like 25 cents an hour, with hand
Wow.
tools and a ruler. And I wasn't even in middle school at that point, I don't think.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've always known what it was. When your father's an electrical engineer, you grow up with the first computer. When everyone's getting their first, you've got your second computer in the household, always into technology, hardware. So for me, it was something I had grown up with. Um, and to me, I also realized that, hey, I want to have this like really nice, cushy job where I wear nice clothes, I get paid a lot of money. I think that's really what we're trained in school.
Absolutely.
Like that's the
Yeah.
visualization that they give to us. You have to do well in school so you can get that, go to good college and get a really great job, make a lot of money, and I'll fight for the C-suite.
Yep.
And as I was doing that very thing, I realized that in corporate America, people do not love you,
No.
and that's very different from when you're in family business.
Yes.
And they love you, they trust you, they give you these amazing opportunities to wear multiple hats, try out different things because they want to see if you can help, but also try to spark your interest in a
Yeah.
way that they don't do that much in corporate. They're paying you to do a particular function of a job. And not that it's wrong or bad, it's just how it sat with my soul for a while, that I realized I was making a lot of money and decisions and putting a lot of time for corporate when I should be doing that for my family business. So I think if even if my family had a shoe repair store, I probably would have thought the same thing.
Sure.
It just so happened to be electronics contract manufacturing.
All
And
right.
so that really was my entrance to it. And when I had my children, I realized that legacy was important to me. So for me, I made the decision to leave corporate and to help bridge that legacy, but happened to be in the industry of electronics manufacturing.
I love it. Uh, what I mean, you like I said in the intro, you've worked for some absolute giants on that corporate side,
Mhm.
Honeywell and Gap and IKEA. And were those roles all on the logistics side?
Yeah, so logistics is really about taking something from point of origin to point of consumption. So it breaks out into a multitude of careers and jobs, but it all is really be about planning and using computer modeling. So the jobs were either in like purchasing on a or scheduling on a global level, making sure that you are moving it on the proper ships and that the product was coming in on its supply chain at the right time in the right quantity so that you can meet particular deadlines. So yeah, it was always in that field, different titles,
Sure.
um, but always retail or electronics.
Got it. What lessons did you learn working for some of those corporate giants that you are able to implement and instill at ESI?
One thing I realized is that, well, let's talk about on the electronics industry side, because really in retail, because people know the names like Gap and IKEA, they
Yeah.
assume certain things, but I found that the company that I worked for at the time was Metrologic Instruments that was purchased by Honeywell, and I found that you make more money in electronics. It may not sound sexy, but because it's harder to
Yeah.
do that than to move um, shirts and blouses and sofas. It's all complex, but electronics requires that you design an element of it, that you put a certain level intellectual capital and IP behind it, and it's more expensive, so the margins are better. And I
Sure.
learned that working in electronics. That was part of my reasons for leaving um, corporate, because I also found that small businesses are the economic engine of the country.
Yeah.
Family businesses are the economic engine of the world.
Yes.
And so I felt kind of disillusioned in a sense that in school they never told us that. They said corporate America. That's when I realized that I was like, we're really part of a pipeline for corporate America in a sense.
100%. Yep.
So once I realized these things, and I really started to take small business very, very serious, the thing that I brought into it was knowing how corporate functions
Mm.
are, how much they spend in marketing, what professionalism looks like. How do we create culture? So if you hear the buzzer, I'm still at the company today. Um,
Good for you. I love it.
how we just how do we grow, what meetings are important and what meetings
Yeah.
are not important, and how
Yeah.
to execute. And I've actually took things that I learned from my family business and took it into corporate, which made me successful in those roles, because in small business you don't have time or money, the resources to have 17 meetings about the same topic. You
Right.
have to wear many hats. You've got to get things done, you've got to get things shipped out. You do not have the same resources, so it's a faster pace. And I
Sure.
felt like corporate was a little bit slower, because you're not, while you're important to that function at that time, as I've said to one of my coworkers, I was like, I could die in my seat, they would replace me and the company wouldn't miss a beat. But
Yep.
in a small business, that everyone, it's imperative that everyone work together as a team, and it's a faster pace that I really enjoyed. And so what I brought things to the company, but I also brought the small business piece to corporate. But at this point, though, I do lean heavily on the learned lessons of corporate, because we aspire to take the company from more entrepreneurial into that more corporate phase, more professional phase.
I love it. I love it. And I'll ask you a question down the road after we talk about some other stuff, what your future looks like. Um, I want to go back in time a little bit to when you founded the Belly Button Boutique.
Mhm.
What prompted that, and uh, uh, tell us a little bit about it. In all of the things that I prepped for this, I did not look into the Belly Button Boutique. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I, like many women, well, I guess this is pre when social media was huge, because I remember giving birth to my second child and people were like, why aren't you on Facebook? And that was in 2008. And um, at the time, my other son was born in 2006. And
Okay.
I had very difficult pregnancies. I didn't understand why it was so hard. No one ever told me how difficult it is on the body, the different health issues you could have. And I felt like I had many. I went to see a lot of specialists and doctors, and they were just, I couldn't go to Target and get the
Right.
products that I needed, or Walmart. They just really didn't exist. I used research. I went to use my background in logistics to identify products that other mompreneurs had created but didn't have distribution. So logistics is the key to so many things.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the distribution, they were shipping things from home or from some third party provider. And I went to showrooms, and same thing, they just didn't have distribution. So I said, if I like curate a website with all of these products, and I take the orders and I deal with the marketing and online, I just learned how to do this, will you just ship it for me? And they said,
Wow.
sure. So when I was on maternity leave for my second son, I again was it wasn't as difficult as the first time, but I started doing all this research. There was no Facebook like pregnancy is hard, let's talk about it, or TikTok to look at,
Right.
or Instareel. It became a discussion board. I would go on the
Yeah.
discussion boards and hear all these women lamenting. because of that, I saw that there was a need. And then I would suggest products to them. And I became the go to person. So I had taken all those things together, listening to women around the country talk about their problems with pregnancy, almost like it was a secret, because they didn't want
Yeah.
anyone else to know the shame that was involved, and created this site, and it went from there. So I had to still work full time. I had two small children, and then I had this online business more so to help other women, because we didn't have the outlet, the community, the connection like women have today, to really know that it's perfectly normal to have difficult pregnancies. Now you can get anything on Amazon, but at the time you couldn't. It was mostly books. um, think of that. And
Right? It's wild. I
it
mean, that
is,
was
right? I
only
mean,
like 16 years ago, 17 years ago. It's wild.
it's a logistics network, because
Yeah.
they're able to get things to you quickly. And that was part of the reason why, after 8.5 years of running my business, I decided not to run it anymore, because Amazon had quickly changed the expectations because of logistics on how
Yeah.
fast people needed it. And you don't want to work with pissed off pregnant women. They're not like the most fun to deal with from a customer service perspective, especially when they're uncomfortable. So I was like, my kids at the point were like 8 and 10. I was like, I'm done with this. And people were like, why didn't you sell it? It's like, still education. I didn't really know to sell a company, go through due diligence and all of that. And I didn't think it was really worth anything, but that's the educational curve. I knew corporate. I didn't know
Sure.
anything about selling businesses.
So, had you already made the jump back into the family business, or were you
Mhm.
still on maternity leave from the corporate world when you started and were running the Belly Button Boutique?
I was still in corporate. I went back
Wow.
to, I literally like had the baby, started the company within 3 months, and was back at work, and the company was like online. And people would send in their orders, and at night I would just ship them out to the ladies, like, hey, I have these orders, can you ship them to these customers? I was being paid up front. I would pay them to
Wow.
ship it, and then I really didn't have to think about it. And there were some items maybe that I had, and I think my kids grew up seeing what it's like to really have a business, and we would go to the post office together, or until they started picking up packages. But for the most part, yeah. And then I went over to my family business, and it just really required so much focus. And like I said, my kids were 8 and 10, and I just really didn't want to see anything related to having anybody's baby ever again. So that made it really easy.
You're just done with the babies.
Yes. Yes, I was, and I am to this day. Mhm.
Now, you made a comment about your background and, you know, your dad starting the business at the kitchen table,
Mhm.
and how that the statistics behind that next generation wanting to take over the family business. What do you think the impression your two kids have, having watched you start Belly Button Boutique and then go back into ESI? What's their take, do you think, on entrepreneurship and family business?
I think it's even more of a complex like intersectionality for them, because they're also Gen Z.
Oh,
And
yeah.
um so they are the, like, what people consider, I don't know why, but undesirable candidates, because like whether you desire them or not, you're going to have to hire them. You can't skip a generation, so you need to figure it out. And I'm
Right.
lucky that I have two guinea pigs of my own. And with them, they've seen it hard, but I've been honest with them. Like, I actually talk about money with them. I talk about the board meetings that I have. They've come in, they grew up like sleeping on the floor on a sick day on a little mat with their, with an iPad.
Yeah.
They've experienced beautiful family trips paid for because of our family business's success. They've heard my stories. They've worked here. They were terrible employees for a very long time. I fired them at least 3 times apiece. And we had a really good talk recently where I said, do you know why I force you to work here? It's because you have no grit at this point.
Mm.
You're used to swiping on TikTok if something's boring, changing direction very quickly. If you don't like a song, you don't have to like go over to the record player, lift the head of the record player, then you don't have take the record off, put it in the sleeve, pull another one out. Like, it doesn't require you work to
Yeah.
just like tap your headphone to go to the next song. So your instant gratification is just so high that I think that it's going to hamper your ability to be successful. So what I'm trying to do is wear you down to the point where you realize that sometimes you have to sit in something that's uncomfortable, that you don't like, that's boring, that is something that you don't want to do ever in life, and still be successful at it. I want you to be able to understand that the mindset of I will bloom where I am planted, because you're not going to love every job that you have. And it's not that you're going to turn on your, level 10 when it's important. You have to practice being level 10 at all times. And
Absolutely.
I just kept repeating that to them. And when they would make huge, expensive errors, I didn't pay them. And because I said, it comes from somewhere. Why should I pay for your mistake?
Yeah.
And the idea was to get them to understand it, to the point where my 16-year-old has said to me, I get it. I know exactly what you're saying. You're right. I had no work ethic at all. I was terrible. And what it did, though, it helped them translate that into school, because
I
school
love
was the same thing. I was like, school's boring for you, I'm sure. You love their religion class, right? Um, you know, it's just, but how do you learn from the religion class? Like, how do you engage with the material so that it's meaningful and it's a transfer of knowledge? It doesn't have to reach those receptors that make you excited and happy, because those
Right.
receptors are a little dull because of the instant gratification that you always get. So, how do you lean into that?
Yeah.
This past summer was maybe the first or second for my other son, where the summers where I've had them not work for me full time. I had the youngest work at a catering kitchen, which is very, very strict around cleanliness and
Yeah.
paying attention and following recipes. And the other was a lifeguard, where you are in charge of other people's lives and you have to stay at attention. There's no cell phone and you have to focus in.
Yeah.
And I said, the other piece is you have to work for people who don't love you
Yeah.
and see what it's like. It's very different. And it all is part of parenting as an entrepreneur, as a boss. And I think if I didn't have that, I still have the lessons that my family taught me
Yeah.
about blooming where you're planted, about grit, about sticking to something even if you hate it, about not quitting, because you can finish it and not repeat it, but you should
Hmm.
not quit, because there's always something to be learned. Every job I've had in my whole life, from when I was 14 years old to today, may not have loved all the jobs, but I've taken lessons from each thing and put it into this company, so that I can tell you that when I worked for Metrologic Instruments, now Honeywell, that I learned about global scheduling and really refined the Kanban system and how that really works, and what it's like to manage people who think differently of you. When I
Yeah.
worked at Gap, I learned what it was like to work on second shift and deal with people who have really challenging familial situations, where they're in abusive situations and their electricity gets cut off, or they are barely making ends meet because they have too many expenses. And it
Yeah.
really gave me an understanding of people that are living to paycheck, who work for you, and how that affects their job. I've learned at IKEA how, just from a global perspective, how big the world really is,
Mm.
about when you do have a supply chain that's all the way on the other side of the world, how a pandemic can impact it, how the closing of a canal can impact it, how if your supplier makes an error on a product, that when it comes here and ships overseas, exacerbates over 6 to 8 weeks
Wow.
before it gets to the port. And that happens to a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
But I had to learn and live those lessons, so that I could also translate that into my children, into the work that I do. Now, being able to be empathetic to my employees, to understanding that we need multiple sources, to talking to my suppliers, like, don't make me your sole source on this particular. It would make sense to have additional sources. I'm able to have more meaningful conversations. And I explain all of those things to my children, because these are the things we have to have open conversations with them. And I'm finally at the point where they're like, they see themselves as bosses. They see themselves. I said, we own this company.
That's awesome.
I get the check, but you will be owners of this company. And it's helped also with me hiring Gen Z and being able
Yeah.
to relate to them in a manner that I relate to my children, and just really learning and asking them questions. And everyone that says it's so hard to have Gen Z, some are challenging because we're not really speaking to the culture in the way that they're used to interacting with the world. And
Yeah.
so that's a long, circuitous answer to,
No, I love it.
but that's just really, my children are seeing the fruits of the labor, but they're understanding the life lessons. And I'm so happy that I'm in a position to teach them in the way that they see me running a business in manufacturing. They see how I treat people. They see how they treat me, how to be a boss, a woman of color, that
Right.
in manufacturing that they've never ever seen. But my children only have seen amazing professional women doing amazing, unique, professional things.
I love that. I love every bit of that, Karla. How does your kids' experiences in the business here, watching you succeed, watching you write a book, um, has that helped them talk to their friends, their peers about manufacturing in a more meaningful way? We were talking before the show about
Mhm.
reaching outside the echo chamber that is our industry, right? We all
Mhm.
love each other, and we're very supportive, and the content resonates internally, but I think part of that challenge is getting outside of that echo chamber, outside of the industry. Are your kids able to reach kids at their level a little bit differently than you think a me or a Drew Crow could?
I wish. I mean, uh, they are not very communicative about it unless somebody asks them. So they're not the types of kids like, my mom owns an electronics manufacturing company. Manufacturing is cool, which is what I would love for them to say, but
Right?
never going to happen. But what they do is when people ask them, so for example, they're in a program at Villanova University. It's an engineering program. The youngest is. He wants to go into environmental and civil engineering,
Cool.
um, which to me is fine. Like, you can still own a company and not work in it. You're just not
Yeah.
operating it. And, that's another way of passing the business along. So with him in this program, they have a little sector of kids that go into engineering. And so I tell them all, if you want an internship this summer in electrical engineering from a hardware side, and learning how to interpret the drawings, how to build, I would love to hire you. Now,
That's awesome.
transportation is a little bit difficult, but it
Sure.
is open to them. Our county, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, has a program for young people who are interested in like these jobs that, construction, electricians, like all types of trades.
Yep.
So, and they're high in demand. So they have a internship for high in demand careers for young people to test them out and see if it's something they want to do for, I think it's like 12 weeks. Let's say it's 12 weeks.
Okay.
And I'm always welcoming these young people to the business. I go and I speak often at schools. And I think that I found that, and it's changing. It's not the students that are disinterested, it's the
Mm.
parents who don't want
Yeah.
their kids to go into manufacturing. They want their kids to go to college. And the thing is like, we've created this as a society. We
Absolutely.
decided back in the 60s, I think it was, that we were going to ship all of our manufacturing overseas and take advantage of lower labor rates and their raw material. And then we're going to bring it over here so we can have these huge fat margins. That's a
Hmm.
great, as a person with an MBA, that is a great business model, right? But since then, it's eroded an entire stateside industry.
Yeah.
And because I love supply chain logistics, but there's so many risks involved. If you don't build in safety stock and all these types of scenario planning, that even then it could cause you to lose money.
Yeah.
So having a domestic plan makes sense, but we just didn't do that as a
Yeah.
country. So for me, I believe that now everyone's like, oh, that was a risk. We need to bring it back to the US. And they want to throw these huge orders at us that we cannot handle because we don't have the people. So
Yep.
now all the parents that told their kids, you have to go to college, did. And they all wanted to go and learn how to code. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they put them in these coding jobs all throughout Silicon Valley. And what happened? What did I read recently? Meta or Facebook? One of them, I think it's Meta. I'm not sure, laying off 2,300 people, maybe
Yep.
Google, I'm not sure. But like
I,
they lay off thousands of people in a clip
yeah.
because now those tech coding jobs, they're using AI, they're using other things to figure it out. So there's another shift. So now
Yep.
those jobs that the parents didn't want your kids to have are now attractive. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is just recently that they're attractive. Because they have 85, $90,000 in college tuition loans payment and no job at home because they can't afford to be anywhere.
Yeah.
But manufacturing is definitely taking a turn. We're at a really interesting place. We can't find people, and if we find them, we have to train them. And this again is the same people that can't really focus.
Yeah.
So now we are teaching them other skills like stop touching your phone. I need you to focus on assembling this. Like every little beep, like movement, vibration, it's like Pavlovian, right?
Yeah.
So it's different time. It's a time where we have to even convince the guidance counselors that this is a great career. I always say manufacturing needs the same sexy makeover that computer programming had with coding.
Yep.
Because I
Absolutely.
know I didn't want to be a computer programmer,
Nope.
but coding sounds hot, right? At the time. Manufacturing sounds like I'm going to leave the building dirty and hot with overalls. And
Yep.
that's not what it is. Especially the types manufacturing is even like making a cake. A baker is a manufacturer. Someone who builds
Absolutely.
cabinets is a manufacturer. Furniture builders. What I do, electronics assembly.
Yep.
I even saw that putting two pieces of plastic together with a screw is considered manufacturing. Because you're
Yep.
taking something from its raw state and putting it and making it into something else. And we've not been very open with that and showing that. So I even just hired a crew to create video of what it's like as a Gen Z to work in manufacturing. And
I love it.
hopefully we'll start pushing. I'll share it with you, Jim, so you can
Please do.
share. But
I cannot wait.
yeah, just what is it like? It's not what you think. And we need to spend more time giving people an image that they can put their mind around.
Yeah. And I think the challenges that we face have changed as well, right?
Mhm.
To your point, we moved a lot overseas and we had that whole offshoring in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We had the closing of trade programs in high school. I remember when my shop class program ended right after I graduated
Mm,
because they moved it to the alternative school where
yeah.
the burnouts went and all that kind of fun stuff. It was my favorite class in high school.
Yeah.
Um, but then we also had this dynamic where in the 90s we had Baltimore Steel. We had all those steel jobs leave the Baltimore area.
Hmm.
We had all the manufacturing jobs in the loop leave Chicago. In 2000s we had all these semiconductor jobs in Arizona that were hot and then it all left and it went overseas and so we've created now a generational trauma, I think, in
Hmm.
addition to this pushing university for all. We've created this trauma in some of these major city centers where middle class people of color, underserved communities who were working in these jobs had the jobs ripped away, and now we're that these jobs are coming back, we're expecting them to be happy about it
Hmm.
and encourage their kids. And I don't know if I would encourage my kids to get into semiconductors here in Arizona, knowing what happened the last time we had that boom here.
Yeah.
Do you think I'm off base in that at all?
No, I mean, it's trauma in general. You want the best for your kids regardless. So you can only give them information based on how we see it and how we've lived it. And, there's a lot of careers where I've told my kids, like, oh, no, you don't want to go into that. You won't make any money. My dad said the same thing to me, like, oh, you want to be a dancer? You're a great dancer, beautiful in ballet, but you will not make any money. If you, and I'm glad he told me that, because that did
Right.
determine what I did ultimately in going to school for business. But there is a lot of, it's like a whiplash approach of parenting. Like, yeah, you
Yeah.
should be in programming or coding.
Yeah.
No, don't do that. You won't get a job. So we don't, now everyone's like, manufacturing, you should get a manufacturing job. It's a good manufacturing job, but people don't know what that means.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that we have to figure out. What is our message? I love the Build Submarines program. I love the message, but what does that mean to people?
Yeah.
Right? Does that mean I have to build it in a marina? No. Then we're part of the Build Submarines program. We build the electronics for submarines, for the switchgear in a
Yep.
submarine. And, before that, I would have thought that I'd have to go to a marina to build a submarine as well, or on a military installation, which you don't.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So let's go back to ESI a little bit. What have been some of your biggest challenges coming back in? What do you think has been one of your biggest challenges taking over there?
Oh gosh, biggest. I just have many. It's always a challenge when you're trying to do something new. My father is an engineer with a computer science master's degree. He has another degree in math. He's very like into the numbers, the facts, the data.
Okay.
I'm so when I decided, okay, really need to integrate culture, mission, values. He's like, oh, the touchy feely stuff. So I said, no, it's not touchy feely. It allows us to understand how we will govern ourselves in this organization. Because if we don't set the tone, the loudest, most dysfunctional person out there is going to set the tone. And that's going to affect all aspects of this business. Um, and I would say that was a big challenge getting him to buy in at first. But my dad and I had worked together for a pretty long time before he retired. That that um, I didn't really have any barriers to those things, but it
Okay.
was hard. He's not a person that's into meetings. He's like, just do it. I'm like, well, people need to be on one accord because now everyone's operating in silos. Things are getting done, but there's efficiencies that need to get done. And this again is taking my professionalism, the corporate culture, the workflows, the processes. Well, processes exist in manufacturing, but really having more engagement, more water cooler discussion.
Okay.
Um, and and since then, like things have gotten more expensive, obviously, but where you make that money up is the retention, the lack of drama that exists. Like there's less
Absolutely.
disagreements now because we know how we are to function as an organization. I took over, I looked at how everyone is being paid. We created a stair step model that we pay for skill. So there's no differentiation between women and men, or, the ladies and gentlemen that are from Cambodia, the ladies and gentlemen that are from the US. It's all based on skill. So
That's awesome.
there's just all the things that I really wanted it to be a fair, diverse from age to background to experience. I just bring in really good people. Like I blind to the name and their back outside of what they can do, if they fit in the culture of presence, being here on time every day, team, realizing
Hmm.
that we work as a team, and pride in what we do and build. It could be a cable with two lugs at the end, but it goes into a $10 million piece of equipment, and if it's
Right.
not correct, it won't work. And so really being mindful of those things. If people can't work without touching their phone, that's not going to work because that's not part of our
Right.
culture. So those are things that I've really had to work on changing. So manufacturing used to be very much a draconian, like the beatings will stop. Well, the beatings will persist until morale improves,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work that way.
No. So do you think that approaching it from that culture, people skills side has been key to the transformation? Because as I said in the intro, you have taken what was re- fairly flat in revenue and really scaled that your organization. Was culture, people skills, those kinds of things the key to that transformation, or was it something else?
I would say my father created an awesome foundation. What needed to be refined was the people. He had picked good people, but to attract more people to grow, you need to have something a little bit more consistent. And that's what I
Yeah,
was going after. To attract Gen Z, I realized like you can't just have a gritty manufacturing environment. So we have to do an overhaul on our break room, on
got it.
our front office. It has to be, I don't know why, but I looked into the research and they just want to feel good about where they are, which
Yes.
I never paid attention to. But that's something that stood out.
Yeah,
So yeah, so I really started paying leaning into people, leaning into culture, um, and then building strategy around that.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk about you a little bit more.
Hmm.
You've won a couple of awards. I think it was the Woman of the Year, Enterprising Woman of the Year, and Entrepreneur of the Year, um, which are massive awards. And so, congratulations. You should be very proud of yourself. What do those awards mean to you, and how do you stay grounded amidst that recognition?
Oh, here's the buzzer again. Um,
Breaks over, breaks over. Get back
going
to
back to
work.
work. Um, I still, honestly, I feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome in a sense. Not that I don't feel like I didn't do the work. I just
Yeah.
feel like awards come at the end of a race. And I'm
Mm,
just really getting into the groove of the race. And don't get me wrong, I am so humbled and I appreciate the awards. And I had to fill out certain elements of it, but there's part of me that when I fill this out, I'm like, I'm never getting this award. Um, every time, like I don't anticipate it coming. And a friend of mine said to me recently, he's like, the reason why you're successful is because you're still hungry
yeah.
and that you don't feel like you won. And there's a great degree of humility. And we had a discussion about, so I brought one of the ways that I helped with the people is I brought in an organizational psychologist.
Mm,
And what he does is, reason why I did that is because I wanted to make sure that we clearly delineated between my father's reign and my reign, for lack of a better term. And
yeah.
we're turning the page. And I wanted them to know, like, me and my dad share the same human spirit, but I am not him, but in a dress.
Got it.
So you're going to have something different management style, and this is the way it's going to work. So organizational psychologist still comes in to talk to the team because we're still working on a couple of things. And they're very, very small. So I highly suggest it for any company.
I love it.
He asked me, he's like, do you find yourself you think you're lucky or unlucky? And I said, definitely lucky. And he tells me a story. Well, he's like, why? I said, before he told me the story, I said, because I just think that there's like this more so like supernatural and being a woman of faith, like God centric thing that allows me to find success in things that normally should not cross my path.
Oh,
And so if I was unlucky, I would think that only bad things happen to me. And I would be waiting for the fallout and actually looking for the fallout.
yeah.
He explained that there's a study of where you have two controlled groups. One was control group of unlucky people who thought of themselves as unlucky, those who thought of themselves as lucky. And they were asked to look through a newspaper, I believe, and count the pictures. The people who felt they were lucky found all the pictures and finished faster than those who thought of themselves as unlucky. And what they
Interesting.
revealed was on page 2, it said there are 62 pictures in this newspaper. And when the unlucky people, they were pissed, like they didn't see it. And they found through the studies that it's a mindset. Lucky people are more open to it, of things that are going to happen in their lives, what's going to come across their pathway. They're willing to take the risk. They're willing to entertain an option or an opportunity. Those who thought of themselves as unlucky always had their head down. They always were like, they were not open to those small opportunities. They were just too hyper focused. And there's more in depth knowledge in that article that you
I
should
love it.
definitely check it out. But
Yeah.
it made me see like it's because of the mindset that I'm able to just be open to it. And I realize that there is a great degree of luck. And it's funny because in my dad's office, it says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I didn't realize that it's been there for 25, 30 years.
That's awesome, though. I love that. I love the story. I'm took a note. I'm gonna go try and find it. If I do, when I do, I'll link it to this episode when we release it. Because I love that mindset, and I've lived my life saying something similar but different. I say surround yourself with positive people, and positive things will happen, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that it's all about that mindset that you go into it. If you surround yourself with people who are negative, uh, you're going to eventually be negative, and negative things will happen to you. But if you surround yourself with people who have positive energy and bring that kind of luck mindset to the conversation, to your space, you're going to start having more positive things happen. So I love that. Um,
Absolutely. Amen.
Amen. Karla, talk to us about your work trying to close the wealth gap in with minorities and minority business enterprises, because that's a big part of who you are, and uh, it to me it talks about the impact that you have, not just in manufacturing but in businesses outside of our space.
Sure. Well, my dad, as a very smart man in STEM, 18 years old, was told it by his high school guidance counselor that you can either become a teacher or join the military. And he had gotten a full ride in math to a college.
Wow.
And he said, well, I don't want to go to college and then become a teacher. He joined the military, fought in Vietnam War. So he's the same age as my eldest at this time. And when he's over on the continent of Africa, he meets for the first time a Ethiopian engineer, electrical engineer, black man. He had never seen a black engineer in his life.
Wow.
And he said, okay, when I get home, that's what I'm going to study. So he went home. He went to community college, took advantage of the whole GI Bill, went to Penn State, got a degree in electrical engineering, eventually went to school, got a master's in computer science. And that conversation changed the trajectory of my family because they started that Electro Soft, and Electro Soft showed us that small business, being in business for yourself, and can create generational wealth. And he knew that he couldn't leave his job to me.
Yeah.
He could leave the savings that from what he's amassed, he and my mother, but they couldn't leave their jobs to me. Imagine what other element outside of a business? I mean, obviously stock portfolios and retirement plans and insurance, but
Yeah.
that you've leveraged the multiple mortgages you put on your house to sustain it, all the relationships that you have built are in it, the customers that you serve, the people that you've hired, the lives that you've changed, and then pass the baton on to your family to carry on and do the same thing. They created a business where their grandchildren can eat from.
I love it.
And so when I look at it that way, like I can't think of a better way to create generational wealth and legacy. And I had to live it. And if I didn't live it, I wouldn't have known it. And so I
Yeah.
felt that when I look at the statistics of the Black wealth gap, that's because of years of when Black men came from home from World War II due to redlining, not being able to take advantage of the yellow ribbon program to
Yep.
have the government not back the home loans for them. And so they missed out on getting their first homes where their white counterparts were able to get homes. And their home, most people's homes, are the biggest investment that they have. So when people sell their homes, they're able to help their children, their grandchildren, take out home equity lines of credit to put their children through school. Black people didn't have that. So they weren't able to start building wealth because the way that the system was created. And I mean, that stems from years of systemic issues of not being able to vote, not being able to, and then when you were allowed to by law, voter suppression, so you
Yeah.
couldn't put the people that could fight for you into office. You didn't have a voice. Um, Women, Black women, honestly did not get the right to vote until 1965. Civil rights saying that it's illegal to discriminate on the basis of color. So there's so many things that um, leave us to feel that there was really no place for us to really even start. You know,
Yeah.
there were no bootstraps because the bootstraps were not even given to, we're not allowed to get them.
You didn't even have boots.
Right.
There are
Exactly.
no
Boots.
bootstraps because there are no boots. You're not
Right.
allowed to have them. Like,
So if we're going to catch up and close that gap, it needs to be done in a way that if you don't have a business, right, what are you passing along? I've seen so many people, and it's not just Black, but Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everybody, that when somebody dies, they have to have a GoFundMe to put them into the ground.
yeah,
That's not good. We don't even get simple burial insurance for that. We don't make sure that the title that from a home that we get is free and clear so that it doesn't get caught up when someone passes away in the process of probate. Wills aren't created. And so when it does get caught up in probate, you have to hire a lawyer and it becomes expensive. So whatever you would get legally, the money is spent down, not being able to create generational wealth. So generational wealth is even just something as simple as getting legal advice as to how to transfer the home from one generation to the next without taking out a lot of like losing money in the transition or having to hire lawyers, or how do you bypass capital gains by putting it into a trust? Like, how do these things happen? You know, we don't get
yeah,
the advice. We're just like, I'll die and they'll figure it out. And that's
yeah,
not fair if we're really talking about how to keep the next generation having a step up. And while I do preach and believe in business, I know it's not everyone's jam, but there's things that we can do that are very simple. As far as, you know, if you start out life and your family left you $5,000, that is way more than the negative net worth that a lot of families of color end up starting out with.
yeah. Absolutely. I
So I
love it.
spend a lot of time talking about it. I make it a normal conversation. I'm on, even though I'm supposed to be promoting my book about manufacturing, part of it, of my manufacturing story is how my family created generational wealth, how
I
it
love it.
affected us, how it impacted us. And those were breadcrumbs and lessons that I wanted others to learn. And I couldn't do it, you know, conversation by conversation. The book just became part of the give back to that. And you know, we talk about investments all the time and how to grow the money that you have. My parents told me at a young age, when you get a job, we want you to max out your 401k, and if you can't max it out, at least get the match. I mean, I
Yeah,
knew that when I was like 12. Those
right.
conversations aren't had at every family's kitchen table.
Exactly.
And so there's a knowledge curve that needed to be acknowledged. And I've become very passionate about it because, you know, had it not been for that conversation on the continent of Africa with that amazing Ethiopian engineer, while my parents would have been fine, they would not have created a legacy and
Right.
generational wealth.
Karla, for me, for any listener out there that wants to join in this as well, what can people who are listening, what can I do to also help address that wealth gap? I mean, I think that's a we're in an interview, so it's a different scenario. But I think a lot of people don't know how to help address that kind of an issue, and so they just kind of ignore it and say, "Oh, somebody else will take care of it," right? So, what can people do that want to help but don't know where to start?
I would say that one of the first things that people need to do is educate themselves about it. Um, let's take the attack right now on DEI. It all gets conflated in the same bucket, right? Like, why are we talking
Yep.
about Black wealth and not about white people's wealth? So it all gets conflated. And if you realize there's a history to it, it makes a world of difference. So people conflate affirmative action. They conflate that with quotas,
Yep.
which both are illegal, and we don't practice. To DEI, which is like, oh, it's a terrible word. It means you're just hiring Black people and Hispanic people for the sake of hiring them, and we want to get people that are good for the job.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that either. It means that we tend to, when we think about our social circles, our religious circles, our familial circles, they tend to be very homogenous. If we had a position that we were offering to somebody, we would offer it to someone in our circles or put it on Indeed or whatever is out there today.
Yep.
The problem with that is that you're not casting a wide net. You're only casting it within the social circle that you operate and things that you know. So if you were to take the time to extend that reach to other communities. So if you go to your church to try to get people to come to work and you put it on the help, why not do it at the Korean church down the street, the
Sure.
Latino church, Iglesia, the uh, the Baptist church, all the churches within the region,
Yeah.
or you find out from them what are the job boards for this organization that even people that are returning citizens who've paid their debt to society, offering it to those and casting and people who are um, differently abled, who
Yeah.
are still able to do good work but have a
Yep.
high unemployment rate.
Yep.
Why do we not figure out DEI includes all those people, LGBTQIA plus as well? Why do
Yep.
we not cast a net? It's hard for me to believe that only white males can do particular jobs well. Um, people are have different experiences that come into need to be taken into consideration and brought together. And then once you have all the applications from all of those places, make your hiring decision. Don't make it
Yeah.
based on color. Just pull in and see what the pool looks like.
Yep.
Okay. If you want to get fresh ideas, right? Well, let's even pull it back. Think about if you have a company and you want to sell and take advantage of the global marketplace. Why does it make sense to have a homogenous organization
Mm-hmm.
of all the same people who look alike if you're going to sell to a market where there's nobody there that looks like the people around the table?
Yep.
That's DEI. That's like creating a diverse space,
Yep.
making it equal for everyone to be able to speak and everyone is heard and included in the conversation. And
Yep.
so when I say, how do you want to help? I think everyone's afraid to have these conversations.
Yeah.
I have them with my white male friends all the time because they really want to help. They're,
Yeah.
amazing people who are willing to be an accomplice with me in having these conversations.
Yeah.
So educate, have the conversations, normalize it. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay to discuss race. It's okay for me to say white man. It's okay for you to call me a Black woman, but
Yep.
let's have a real conversation about this and acknowledge that systemically there are barriers that keep people that look like me and my husband and my children from moving forward and fast and when compared to our white counterparts. Let's
I,
acknowledge that.
I I love every word you just said, and that could be the clip of the episode. Uh, I talk, I facilitate, I've designed leadership workshops that I deliver in Arizona and outside Arizona now. Um, and I always talk with the groups that I teach, I guess. I hate using the word teach, but that I work with um, about filling the room with a couple of different things. As a leader, your job is to fill the room with people who are smarter than you, that fill the gaps in your skill set, but also that don't look and think like you. That
Mm-hmm.
because when you fill that room with, and it's human nature to want to fill the room with people who believe and think and have ideas the same way we do because we crave that validation,
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But when we start looking outside of that validation, that you talking about your kids, that instant gratification when it comes to validation, and we hire people who challenge us, are smarter than us. We grow at such a rate that the business almost can't keep up in certain instances, right? And so I love everything that you just said. Do you talk about that? Let's shift to Dark, Dirty, Dangerous. Do you talk about that concept in the book itself?
I do. I do. It's a little bit more of book friendly, so it's definitely in my voice. But to try to appeal to people because it's so EDI is such a divisive and inflammatory word that's been politicized, and it's really honestly a beautiful thing. And I say
Yeah.
that because I am the co-chair of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Manufacturing Alliance, SEPMA.
Okay.
And we were saying like, oh, we can't find employees. We've been looking for 150 years. We can't find anybody. We hired Drexel Solutions Institute at Drexel University to help us do a study to find out where are all the employees? Like, where do we find them? Who are we targeting as from a market perspective? And they found that the next generation of people that are more prone to lean into manufacturing are women,
Okay.
immigrants, and people of color. Everybody that's being excluded in DEI.
Yep.
So I just found that to be ironic and interesting at the same time. Um,
Absolutely.
and I also found that I think DEI is being used as a smokescreen to cover a lot of other issues because really the people that are making a lot of decisions are voting based on the economic impact
Yeah.
of these decisions. And
Absolutely.
DEI is really not the issue. When you think about how many people of color actually are in a company that or suppliers that are getting that quote unquote what we even deem as a fair share is like nothing compared to the rest
Okay.
of the pie. So we're basically
Absolutely.
being told that the crumbs of the pie that we left for you are no longer fair. So we
Right.
want them back.
Yep.
So so yes, that is discussed in my book because it's like, let's have a real conversation about it and don't
I
just
love it.
vilify it. Come with data, come with facts, not from the internet data, but like a reference material that states real data and make your decision off of data. If your argument is good enough, it should stand up against fact.
Yeah. I love it. Here's the book, everybody. Dark, Dirty, Dangerous. Uh, Building of the Vibrant Future of Manufacturing. Karla, I read it. I wish people could see the highlight and underlining I did in it because I loved this book.
I'm
It's
so honored. Thank you so much. I
got a
appreciate
very special place on like the good bookshelf. I mean, these are all great books, but I've got my other books that I need to easily reference right here. Um,
Thank
Karla, if you were to think about your book and the people who are reading it, what is the one takeaway that you hope that they get from reading it?
Just one. I would say that I hope I changed their mind about what manufacturing is, like the environment of it, what it's like. I filled it with a lot of stories, personal, honest accounts of it. Even my thoughts. I thought it was not a place for me. Um, to just have an honest look from a different perspective of
Yeah,
what manufacturing is, that it's not dark, dirty, and dangerous, despite the title that to throw you
right.
off. It's
Absolutely.
actually been something that's changed my life and the three generations of my family.
I love it. I love it. And I want to come up with a way that I can send 5 copies of your book to listeners. So,
Done. You got it.
I,
I can send
anybody
them out.
who, yeah, anybody who comments on the podcast or on the YouTube video, or even sends a message to me on social media or my email, the first 5 of you, I'll send a copy of Dark, Dirty, Dangerous to, because I think more people need to read this book. It's one of the best manufacturing centered books that I've read in years, and
Oh, thank
it
you.
touches so many different parts, and it could be, in my view, that book that gets in front of the people outside the industry, outside of that echo chamber that we were talking about earlier,
Hmm.
and I love it so much. Um, I've got two more questions for you, Karla.
Hmm.
The first one is, what is next for you, ESI, and all the things that you have your hands in? What's next?
Growth. This was a family business, a family. My dad was just like, I don't need the headache. So it was a lifestyle business, but now there's so much need for manufacturing.
Yeah,
So really turning on all of the flames on the stove
I
and
love it.
trying to cook up what's the next leap for us. So I would love if there are any electronics manufacturers, contract manufacturers that are in the market to exit, that don't want to sell to private equity but want a family owned company to run them, please reach out. We're looking for those opportunities as well. And yeah, so I'm leading that, and I'll be an empty nester in 18 months. So
Dang.
yeah, so my next life as a mom without children at home. So that's what I'm getting, trying to underskip my mind around it. I feel like I've been a mom for like 15, 20, 30 years at this point.
Well, you'll always be a mom. It's just the needs as a mom from your kids will change, right?
That's what I hear. That's what I
Yeah,
hear.
and mine are younger than yours. I have 14 and 10, but I've just noticed as they've gotten older that their needs from me as a dad, their needs from my wife, it changes, right? And I look to that time when they fly the coop and go out on their own. Uh, always be their dad. It's just their needs from me will change. It'll be less like band-aids on knees and more like mental band-aids on breakups and jobs and stuff like that, if that makes any sense
Yeah,
at all.
absolutely. Absolutely.
um, so Karla, last question I ask all of my guests, and I love asking this question because we don't know what we're going to talk about, so you can't plan for this answer. What haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience today?
What haven't you asked me? Oh my gosh, I feel like we've talked about so many things.
It's
Do
been
people
such
say
an
that all
awesome
the time? Like,
conversation. Yeah.
um, I guess one thing I think about with oh, you haven't asked me what I'm scared of.
Ooh, that's a great question. Maybe I need to make that a normal question. What are you scared of, Karla?
I'm scared of not being able to transition this company to the next generation
Hmm.
properly because it has a high rate of failure from 1 to 2, but 2 to 3 is even more rare.
Yeah.
And the way that I want to structure it is just so different. Like I still want to be in manufacturing and electronics manufacturing. I've never really met anyone that looks like me that does what I do. I
Yeah.
think that's just in and of itself from a cultural perspective important.
Yep.
But if
Yeah. Got it. Uh, I I understand that, and I think that's a very real fear. I don't know if a lot of people know the data going into that second to third generation transition about the success rate or failure rate, whichever way you want to look at it, right? But it's not great, and so you do have to be a lot more intentional and ingenuitive, I guess, if that's a word, that to make that happen. And I think you're doing the things amazingly well with your kids, and the way that you have set them up with grit, with understanding how life actually works. Because I don't know if I know because of data that typically that third generation is more silver spoon ish, right? Because they haven't seen that struggle. They've seen kind of that gravy train. They've gone on those trips, they've gone on the things. But I think your kids have also seen that struggle because of your unique experiences and your lived experiences. They've seen that struggle in itself. So I think you're setting your kids up pretty well, and you know, to your point earlier, they'll own it whether they're operating it or not. Absolutely. Karla, I've loved this conversation. I need to get out to your neck of the woods and meet you in person and have just hang out with you for a little bit, see the facility and all that. But thank you so much for being on today. This has been such a fun conversation. I can't believe over an hour's gone by already. Oh, thank you. Well, folks, that's a wrap on another episode. Karla Trotman is an absolute badass. I'll say it right here on the show. She, from hearing about the familial journey, especially that trip to Africa by her dad, meeting the Ethiopian engineer, to Karla's being able to really transform Electro Soft with people skills and company culture in mind, uh, has made a impact on me. The book made an impact on me, and I know that her contribution, her legacy, is making an impact on the community, the industry as a whole. So I hope you enjoyed this show today. Again, thank you to Karla for sharing her journey, her wisdom. And for me, what came out most was the passion that she has. Um, Folks, to you, thank you for tuning in. If this episode sparked that special fire or passion within you, don't keep that to yourself. Please share it with your friends, your colleagues, your grandma, your nan, whatever you call her. Anyone who could use a little extra inspiration today or any day beyond today. Make sure to check out the mfgconnector.com for our past episodes, some resources, updates, and connect with us on social media to keep these conversations going. Again, anybody, the first five who comment on this episode or on social media, I'll send you a book because everybody needs to read this book. If you've loved this episode, please rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening to it on. Every time you rate and review it, it helps us grow. It rockets us up the charts based on some funky algorithm that exists within podcast platforms, that when you're rated and reviewed, you reach more listeners. So rate and review us so more people hear these stories. Guys, folks, also remember, we're not just here to tell stories. We want to build this community that celebrates the people and the culture that drive this industry forward. So stay tuned for more episodes filled with guests as amazing and as insightful as Karla. So until next time, keep connecting, keep learning, keep telling your story. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'll see you next week.